haircut, dude.
Probably.
You just go next door tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
Wake up, go to the salon.
Yeah. Get your nails did. Get your eyebrows fixed. Get a little trimming.
This piece right here was just in Josh's tire.
Yes, it was.
Which, pretty crazy. We definitely didn't have any idea what it was, and I remember staring at that thing for a long time thinking, what in the hell?
What is it?
Yeah. Lo and behold, whoa, did you guys just get real loud?
It felt that. Now I can hear you good now.
Yeah.
I wonder if it just wasn't getting power there. I don't know. That's
Because
weird.
it was light. Now
It was light.
Yeah,
Are you guys too loud, or are you good?
No,
I think it sounds fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
We might spike out if we get excited.
I think it's just in our ears. I think the levels are the same. I think maybe this thing just wasn't getting power for a minute or so, or not a lot of, I don't know.
I ain't your tech guy.
And that's right. I'm not gonna be able to figure out the answer to that.
The answer to the tech,
With a
or the
tech,
answer to that
Both.
rod in your hand.
both. The tech is, I don't know why that just happened. One thing that happens with this whole rig that I still am just in a guessing phase of is every once in a while you'll just hear like staticky robot noises is what I would describe them as. And when that's happening, I really have no idea what's going on at all. Sometimes it's like you put a phone close to the cords and stuff, and it happens. And it'll just go away. Sometimes you just go like this. It goes away. No idea. Like the other day, too, I was doing one with my dad. And for like 10 minutes, we were sitting there trying to figure out how to get rid of this static noise. There was just a static noise. And no shit, every time we do this, it would go away. It was like every time these headsets just got close to the floor, it stopped. There's this buzzing that you're hearing. Gone.
No kidding.
No idea. No idea why that stuff's happening. I don't know if it's like bad chords or like, it seems to me though like something interferes with that thing. And again, not being the tech guy, I don't actually know what's happening.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm definitely not the tech guy.
I mean, it's really a odd thing.
I have to when I hook up to our equipment podcast, like it takes like 2 hours for me to hook it up
just
to get
get
it right
everything ready.
and be like, what? Drives me crazy.
I feel like I got to a point with that thing where I just start putting it on the same numbers every time as far as like everybody's volume. And there's kind of a safe spot where it's like once I get it into the editor, if I need to bring it up a little bit, we're good. But
Yeah.
I'm generally louder than most people. So I, can't really base everything off of my level.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know, tech guy. But anyway, what is it?
No idea, man. I know what it was when we finally got it loosened up and got it to come out. We just kept on pulling.
Yeah, that was the part where it was really funny too, because I start pulling it out,
Like, is this a
and you're just
friggin'
like,
joke?
"Don't pull it all."
I wanted to get my plug ready. Hell, you could have just kept on pulling it. I'd have had time. I don't understand how the roundness punctured, other than
Just sheer.
maybe hit it vertical,
Yeah.
and then just sheer weight.
I think it could have bumped and rolled up and just got wedged and just sheer weight. But it is weird that thing that didn't bend at all or anything.
Yeah.
I guess with that being said, we were out checking out Josh's lease, which maybe is going up before this, maybe not. I don't know. But that's something that we filmed. We had a good time with that. That was really the highlight of the last several days for me, just seeing some bucks and cruising around and hearing your experiences and stuff like that. And I think, I don't know, I just feel that there's still so many questions I have, like from a hunting strategy standpoint, like, and some stories about hunting and that type of stuff.
Well, that's why I wanted you all to ride up there, because we've talked about it in the past, and you've hunted some of the similar
yeah.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the stuff you've hunted is that vast.
Nah. The one thing, though, that I am kind of curious about is the timber. And I feel that I want to hear more stories about being in the timber in that area or similar areas where it's that steep and gnarly. It's obviously thick. Can be.
Can be.
It's extremely steep.
It is extremely steep.
And
If you pull up like do you ever use the gradient color on Onyx?
Mm-hmm.
I started using that this fall,
Mm-hmm.
just to try to find better access that's
Mm-hmm.
not red.
Yeah.
So everything in this area, looking at that gradient, is red, which is on average 45 degrees.
Gee.
Everything.
When that's the case, my belief is it has to, in ways, if you can find it, become easier to find those little pockets that they're going to lay on or spend their time and move on it. But also, there has to be a ton of area where it's like, how would the deer even get through there? Or how do you set up on it? I guess those are the questions that I have.
In the timber here, I mean, you're going to hunt funnels
Mm-hmm.
big time.
Yep.
Not funnels like that have been seen Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this steep ground, just like we were talking about when we were up there looking around. It's like the path of less resistance
Mm-hmm.
and less under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, Bo Martonic was down in February,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to go out without the leaves on and look around. And so we were side hilling just around the side of a mountain. He's like, I think I'm going to put a camera here. And I was like, what for? And he's like, well, just to see if deer travel. I was like, dude, those batteries will last until like 2030 because you're only going to get like 4 pictures here. But it's just a difference in, because Bo hunts big timber
Yep.
in the mountains of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
But when you get these steeps like these deer, I think they travel vertical and sideways
Mm-hmm.
from flat to flat, and they're not going to go through a drain that's 200 foot long and damn near vertical rock wall.
Yeah.
They're not traveling through there.
Mm-hmm.
So the trail above it, very prominent, that they're traveling right there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly looking for those choke points that just help the deer travel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really forcing them that way. They just
Right.
don't want to go. They don't want to have a rough walk.
Yeah,
just
it's
like us.
They don't want to go across like huge bottoms and super steep, narrow stuff. And that's something that I feel like I'm continuing to learn, and some of the stuff you and I have hunted together, where it's like, man, yeah, on a map in theory,
It looks
like
killer.
it looks like you could just, and it appears that you could just go right around it. But then you get actually in there, it's like, what the hell would anything ever go across here unless it's straight forced?
That's right.
Which would be challenging to do that anyway. And I just think of, there was a spot that I was scouting. And I told you a little bit about it. It was before I had found those couple of sheds this past February.
Mm-hmm.
And I was walking this spot and got back in there. I'd been looking at it and like kind of drooling at it on the map for a while. And it was a finger off of a bigger main ridge, but it was a big long finger. And then it had kind of a horseshoe at the end of it. And at the end of that horseshoe, you could tell that there was some sort of disturbance that was likely kind of cut towards the end and on the knobs of those last two, I guess, little mini fingers off of the point.
Yeah.
And within that bowl, I was like, oh man, there's going to be like, all this, travel in between on that steeper stuff. And I get in there and it's like, no, it's so steep that everything's actually going in a roundabout way, going way up and around that stuff. And I just think here, there's got to be tons of areas that deer just actually never go. Tons of areas.
So. Yeah.
Like there's no reason for them to go down and back up that when they could just take the roundabout way and go up and around it. Just because physically it's almost impossible in some of these places.
There's all, all in these mountains. There's prospect roads from them looking for coal seams and being able to follow it, logging roads. And the deer, that's their corridors of travel. Old mine benches. Because it's a lot easier, even if they have to go all the way through the holler, they might shortcut it up in the head of the holler somewhere. But I swear they'd rather travel around than go down and up, just like us. But the timber's the same way. I mean, even in the open ground, you could see, like when we were talking about the transition lines of the coming out of the mines into the timber. I mean, those are just hotbeds because
it's kind of like a field corner in a flat farm ground setting.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
it's just like this is where all the animals and people and everything for years have created this path of least resistance.
Yeah.
I'm going right here.
Yep. I'm gonna go in by this fence post. On a platform.
Yep.
But yeah, it's the same case.
So I think that one thing that's helped me understand that a lot better is elk hunting. You'll be elk hunting and you know that those things can just like truck a thicket. They can just go right over it. But it's like if you got super steep and super thick, they just don't. They can. They physically can do it, but they don't do it. And I think when you see that over and over again, it's just like, oh, well, not to say that elk won't be in steep stuff. They absolutely will, especially if it's avoiding pressure. But it's the same thing. And I like that addition you put at the end of the passive least resistance unless pressured.
Yeah.
Like, because they will adjust, but there's also so much room in places with big timber, big mountains that there's more places to hunt in like a 1 mile by 1 mile block than there is in like open farm country. So it's like people have more room and deer have more places to escape, and they just will leave.
That's the toughest. That's the toughest part of hunting is people talk about patterns of deer, and they can do that and watch the same deer day after day or every other day, same times. Like these deer they're like nomads, The bedding doesn't change from here to a mile away or 2 hollers away. So you might hunt here and they're way over here. It's so big, it's hard to pinpoint. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I ground hunt, because you can go
hunt bigger.
Yes, and you can go to the deer instead of waiting for the deer to come to you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in an ambush situation, you're waiting a little bit. But I like being able to see it and go if he hitting, because I've just not had luck pattern and saying this deer's going to come here, So that's why I ground hunt so much, is because I'd rather just go to them and not take that factor of waiting for something.
Calling wise, do you ever rattle or anything?
Very little rattling, because very little responsiveness.
Yeah.
And then
what's been your experience rattling? Like when you've had bad experiences, like what are those? No response.
No bad experiences. The only experience
just not getting
no
them
response.
to come in.
I mean, I've rattled in one deer here.
Really?
Compared to
how often do you do it?
Now?
Not any now, right?
No, I do 0 now. Yeah. It's just like something that's just like, why am I packing these around? Not packing these around anymore. Not having any. And I did it for years. Just.
When you're rattling, are you in a tree stand or are you on the ground?
I've done
in the past.
Well, mainly in a tree stand.
My belief is that
sound,
that's why.
Sound?
I don't know. Yeah.
Sound waves?
Sound, and like just also the hollowness of like, think about if you're down on a side hill and this super steep stuff and the leaves are off and it's calm, crunchy day. It's like if you're in a tree stand, you're rattling, even if you're making a little bit of ground noise. It's like what you talked about when you told that story earlier today of those bucks fighting, and you get up there and the whole hillside's just exploded. It's like if you're gonna rattle on those types of days, which in my opinion are great days to do it, because you rattle, you stop and then you can hear them coming too. It's like, man, when we changed this is when Rattling started working again for us. Is like, have you ever seen those videos of Keith and I just like rolling on the ground and like breaking stuff? Like, to me, this is a sweet spot to be able to do that if you're using like folds of terrain and stuff like that. But hell, I don't know. I also could try and have the same exact results. It's just something that fascinates me. Is like,
hell, I might put it in the arsenal again this fall. But like, I could, as soon as I go across the river, I'm packing them again because I've had way more response over there than I have here.
Oh, you're talking about sound too, and you're talking about it's harder to cast it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor in it.
I guess I probably should, but I just never had much luck with it.
Well, there's some, I mean, a lot of the hills that I'm talking about too are smaller. Like from top to bottom, just flat out, not even close. The height, elevation change, it's not the same. So I could definitely see where that would impact it a lot. You're never going to rattle in a buck too if some bitch can't hear you.
That's right.
You know, like you can't rattle a buck in that doesn't hear you.
So if I
No,
I don't.
it's
I mean,
stupid, but
no, that's the same as you're not going to kill any deer where there's no deer,
right.
you know. But then I snort wheeze more than I do anything.
When and is that when you're in close proximity to deer, like you see them, or just whenever?
I do it just as I'm
Blind.
walking.
Yeah.
Instead of grunting.
Give us one.
Oh no, I don't want to do it. I'll blow snuff all over us.
Give us one.
That's a pretty nice one.
Just sit in the truck and just do that shit for so long.
Oh no.
Like a weirdo.
Oh no, I've done the same thing, and it seems more responsive than anything.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's been crazy since people started filming the snort wheeze. You know, whenever that started becoming popular, probably early 2000s is when I first remember it really popping up. It's like snort wheeze, and it's like ever since people started doing that, it's just become, you know, one of the most used tools of whitetail hunters across the country.
I mean, I carry grunt call with me always. I just don't grunt. I snort wheeze more than I grunt when I'm on the ground. I mean, I've had them across the holler and see them, and they'll be beelining like down, and I just and then somebody stops and just he's coming. Like as soon as they turn, it's like
Get ready.
hey, you know. You know,
Heart racing, brain soup.
And I've done it, you know, multiple times. They're just really responsive to it. You know, right situation, right day.
Can be good any time of the year though too.
Oh, I've not heard deer, but I'm sure that they do it all the time. Just to.
I bet they're doing it right now.
Yeah.
Somewhere, someone snort wheezing out there somewhere.
Oh yeah, probably. Possibly.
Probably up in that 10-acre clover patch over there at the lease. There's just like probably like 30 deer in there right now, and bucks are snort wheezing at each other, saying, "Get the hell away from my clover."
Yeah, they could be. If there was a clover patch over there.
where we parked and we saw all those big bucks.
Yeah,
There's a shit ton of clover over there. Yeah.
They just planted that. The mines did that.
That was like, ooh, nice little complimentary food plot up there.
That's big.
Yeah. There's a lot of tracks going into that thing, too. When we were driving past, I could see them going all up in that stuff. Which I'm sure they don't hit that in the daylight, but at night, that's a little congregation area up there.
Guarantee it.
Do you read it like scrapes often out there? Are you picking up on those and using that? Or are you, I mean, obviously there's a lot of visual aspect that goes into what you're doing a lot of the time, but like if you're going to commit to hanging a saddle up, are you looking for sign, or what kind of makes you go in that route?
Early season, I'll hang up with food if if the acorns do drop, or, I think acorns drop every year.
Mm-hmm.
Just depends on if you find the trees that are dropping them.
Yeah.
That's just how they might not, you might not have this big mass where you're just rolling around like marbles.
Mm-hmm.
But I even think when you go on big mass, it's a big mass on the ridge or point wherever your hunting is. All the acorns drop there. Doesn't mean that 2 hollers over, all the acorns dropped.
Yeah.
So early season, just looking for food and glassing. I still glass a lot in the early season.
Yeah.
Because they're still feeding in the evenings, coming out in the open before the acorns drop, if you catch them early. And might set up there, and then, once the rut hits, there's a difference in scrapes for me. Like, if I see a scrape, and, like, I'm not going to set up on a scrape that
has a little V of like 1, 2, 1, 2, and it creates
like
a little
just
V.
Just a quick power. I'm looking for, like, car hood scrapes that look like you put a disc in them, and there's scrapes everywhere. Multiple deer are using them.
Like even like around, like an autumn olive or something.
And I will sit on one of those.
And what is that for you? What does that mean? Like, what does that big of a scrape mean? And what's the difference between that and just the the pawing? The simpler, smaller.
Well, I'm just taking the odds that more than one deer's using that scrape. And yeah, the big dominant buck might have come in 2 hours ago and left with a doe, and he could be 3 ridges over. That's cool, but that scrape is telling me that more than one buck's using that. So let's see what comes and checks it, because you might not get on the dominant buck. He might already be out there with a doe. But who's to say, since he left, that another mature buck didn't say, hey, it's my chance to get in his territory. I've done bred the does over here. Let me go check this scent.
Something that I think about, or have been thinking about the last few years, and I've had some good examples of talking with friends and knowing what they were getting for trail camera pictures and stuff like that in areas where there was a big mature buck kind of hanging at that very front end of the rut. It's like late October, early November. And the example that I think of that comes to mind that just was a really interesting one, and I try to consider this to help boost my confidence during that time of the year. Because to be honest, I'm still for my days that I really like to be out there, I'm still a couple weeks shy. October 28th, it can be good. I've seen some real good days. One of the best days I ever had was days consecutive was like 28th, 29th, 30th in October. But it's like you can be off of where that hot doe is and you're in a dead zone. But that's the rut in general. But early on, it seems like if you find those scrapes that are just torched, man, like wrapped around the bottom of a pin oak or an autumn olive, or it's at an intersection of trails and there's freshly hit car hood scrape. I think that can indicate that a buck is already hanging with a doe. She may not be in heat yet, but he's letting every other punk know, hey, dudes, I'm here. Get the hell out of here. And the reason that I think that, and the example that comes to mind, or the number one, there's a lot of them, but the number one is Luke Nissen. We used to film our friends in Iowa. We had private land video, and then we had public land video. And we would film those guys. We would be on, the bucks that they were on some private land in Iowa with them, filming them. And Luke is on this, monster in 2017. Tank of a buck. He and Luke shot some freaky big bucks. And we go in and, actually, I had went in and hunted with him and we didn't see anything. But then Greg went a day later, 2 days later maybe. I think it was November 1st. And they ended up killing this buck. But the reason that Luke was in there is he found this scrape, or he had and then checked a camera that was on a scrape that had just blown up. And all of a sudden this buck, every day, like clockwork, is coming into this. and he's just hitting this spot, and he just kind of disappears back into this bedding area. But it's obvious that he's close because he'll even hit it sometimes randomly in the middle of the day. And it's like, I guess maybe he doesn't have a doe, but regardless, something there, and what other than a doe at that point in the year would be keeping him right there that consecutively, day in and day out for like 2 or 3 days, 4 days, or whatever
Just
it was.
waiting for?
I mean, it almost appeared to be that way because he's torching this spot. I mean, he's got this scrape annihilated, and he's checking it constantly. And I think he may not be betting with her, but they're communicating potentially through that. Like, she's maybe funneling through there and hitting that. And it's like, if I find that time of the year, even if I'm not necessarily that fired up about the spot, it's like if you find a big, crazy hit scrape where it's like, man, they're hitting that a ton. I mean, late October is always good to be on a scrape, but like that type of scrape specifically, because I agree, you find that like little scrape line, it can help you if you already feel confident that there's a buck. Like, for example, if you find a big monster track and it's smoking fresh, rained last night, it's first light, stopped raining an hour before daylight, and you find a smoking fresh track, and you're like, that's a tank. And then you start following those tracks, and maybe you don't pick up on them for 20 yards, but then you see that little scrape. It's like, well, that same buck. And you can track it to where you think he's bedded. That's a different story. I know Warb last summer was telling a story about him doing that, and then they ultimately bumped the buck. But it's like you're tracking it back on that really specific trail. But on the other hand, when you find those monster scrapes, like they're, to your point, multiple deer using them, and there has to be some sort of meaning. And I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what it is, but it seems to me like, what else would it be other than a hot doe hanging around there, and he's just communicating with all the other deer?
Or like 4 or 5 throughout the night, 4 or 5 different sets of doe groups come through there.
And he just
and all
went
kind
to that hot one.
Yeah, and then like they all cross that spot, and he's, that's his little signpost.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna smell it every time they walk through, and then waiting on the first one to switch over.
Switch over.
How'd that work for you? I would say that the switchees ain't real appreciative of it.
Switchy.
I'm just saying. But like last fall when I found those scrapes, I found them that afternoon, and I was like, good night. Put a camera up, and deer in there all night. They were in there at daylight.
That's the buck that you killed last year in West Virginia. Yeah.
And it's like, and he came in that morning.
Time out. Hold up. Tell me the story of how you found him. Like more of the detail.
I had pictures of him early in the summer.
Yeah, of that buck.
Yeah.
Yep.
On minerals.
Mm-hmm.
And probably late August, like he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And like I never went back to the minerals, it was a cell camera.
Mm-hmm.
Never got another picture. I was struggling to find a deer to hunt. Was seeing deer, glassing, but just not what's required.
Right.
And Zach said, Untamed Zach, he's like, dude, you need to go up there and find that flower buck. He said, he's somewhere up there. Just go up there and find him. I was like, okay, dude, I'll try. So I didn't even take a bow with me, but we went up on this, and it's a small ridge, not small, but it's.
I have to say, what the hell small ridge mean to you?
It's a couple miles long.
Sure, small. Little
Yeah. with some finger points coming off.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm just pretty much speed scouting.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. Just I'm wanting to catch something to catch my eye. And I found those 2 scrapes, and I was like, good night.
And what exactly?
It was in a low gap two reclaimed knobs came down, and I was telling you that I mowed last year. So those two knobs came down, and then there was like a triangle of like where the reclamation was flat before it went back over the slope, and it was probably 90 yards long and at the max 50 yards wide. But like where I was hunting, it was 20 yards wide, and I mowed that last year because you couldn't get through it, and it came up that real nice grass. When I mowed it, I sprayed it and killed it, and then I just seeded it just direct with clover and but the fescues came up, and so but the clover did too. But like I put a camera up on those scrapes because it was just
it kind of created like a little lane in there, right? Like, well, obviously with the mowing, it's some sort of.
But it was a lane from them coming because there was a prospect road going out to one side, one end of it. So they were coming from the timber, coming through, and then going through the low gap and going to the other side. And they would use the thickets up on the hills too, but you could tell once I mowed, there was a noticeable natural trail coming out of that bench, and you could walk that bench and walk the same deer trail. Instead of it going up, it went all the way out the ridge and all the way around the point, the end, and into the holler on the other side. I mean, there was obviously deer trails going up, but the prominent one was going the long way around.
So when you found the scrapes, they were just like
two
Magnum scrapes or what? Two.
Very little. I mean, there was some just like pawing scrapes, like them just stopping on the field edge or on that soft edge and just pop, pop, go, pop, pop, maybe hit a limb or two, those quick ones. But I was like, we're going to hunt here. And then I got all those pictures of those deer, but I knew I was going back tomorrow. But we were going to hunt that morning. I said we didn't hunt in the morning, but there was deer in there. I said, we'll come in midday, check the wind, find us a tree. And the options were very slim pickings. You all saw the growth that we have on these reclaims.
Did you guys end up hanging on a sycamore or was it a sycamore?
No,
tree?
It was a pawpaw tree is what we got in. And I sat there for 30 minutes dropping milkweed.
Did you eat any pawpaws?
No.
You like those things?
No.
What?
No.
You really don't?
No.
You do?
Yeah. I would think Ben would. No, I'm not. I don't like them. I drop milkweed, and it'd blow it that way. I drop more milkweed, and it'd take it through the gap. I drop more milkweed, and it'd blow this way. And I said, temperature's going to drop. I said, let's just go over here to the edge, as close as we can get going over the hill, and just hunt. I said, I feel like as soon as the sun starts going down, it was already cool, but it would pull through that low gap, and then just.
I think I remember that part. I think where you're dropping and it's going down later in the evening.
I go over there, and I'm like, this is where we need to hunt. And I was like, okay, let's find a tree.
And it kept getting better though, right towards the dark, because that was kind of your theory on it, is that it was just going to continue to drop.
Like before,
even
hour
right
before
away,
you could see, like it was just sucking. And so we got in this pawpaw tree. It was about 12 inches, and then it split about 3 foot off the ground. So we had to pick what branch we wanted to go up. And we got in this daggone thing, and it wasn't 8 inches. Another advantage of a saddle is you can just get in places that you can't get elevated with stands and stuff.
Yeah.
And we were 10, 12 foot maybe. We got to the point where me and Alex, the cameraman, he was above me 1.5 feet. We got to the point where, like, the tree was creaking. Like, and I was
it
like,
got dead calm. Or like not. Like the thermal was still pulling down, your wind was still good, but isn't there a clip where there's a deer right underneath of you and
Dude.
The
So
ankle's like right here.
That's what was crazy about the wind and the thermals is like we were there maybe 45 minutes, and I was like, Alex, deer. He's like, where? I said, it's just walking. I hear it walking.
Yeah, I remember that.
And a doe comes up. She comes dead under us from down wind and walks right under us. Goes through her. Next thing I know, I hear. I was like, hey. And I didn't even see it there. I was like, big buck. And Alex is like, where? I said, it's following this doe, same path, just get ready, And he came up and stopped maybe 15 feet right here. And we're just sitting there watching him. And I said, what do you think? He said, I don't think so. And I said, man, he's a good deer. And then he comes up dead under me, probably 7-8 feet, and stops right here off my corner. And the angle camera, I'm right here, and you can see him. I mean, he's...
That's what I'm remembering.
And then, so he comes from the downhill side, comes under us, and then goes through that low gap. And it's like neither one of them. And I'm like, what's the wind doing now? Like, is it just swirling and taking it up out of here? Because it wasn't pushing it to the ground, for sure, because we would have been busted.
Mm-hmm. He'd have smelled your degree deodorant.
Yeah, most definitely. But, like, from that point on, and that was like 2:30, like, he took that doe up, and we're sitting there looking. You can see these two knobs, and we're hearing deer. We can't see them, but we're hearing deer over here on this knob. They're not running. They're just walking, browsing, it sounds like. But, like, on this knob, you can, like, I'm going, man, you see it. And we're still watching that same buck, but then you hear another buck snort wheeze. And you're looking, and also you just going through those tickets. I just saw a horn. I was like, there he is. I said, what is that buck? What is that? And it's, then they're fighting. And then a couple other bucks come from off the top. And then they're running. They're running that deer down by me. And then a couple more does come off the bench in front of me. And, like, it's pandemonium. I'm not, like, you talking about, like, what to do. And, the wind, I don't know how because these deer, they go all the way. Like, the does, they're running past us and running below us and then coming back out. Like, if you're a deer hunter, it's like one of those evenings you want to be right there just to listen.
Oh, yeah.
And
just so much going on, it's overwhelming.
I mean, it started at 2:30, and it never stopped until I shot the buck, 25, 30 minutes before.
Yeah, I was going to say, you end up getting him pretty late.
Oh, no, he never, like, I thought we saw a bigger buck, but, like, those deer were snort wheezing, and it was crazy, because you can hear me in the video, because Alex, like, here, I was like, hey, the deer all around us, just move slow from one to the other, just kind of show everything that's going on best you can. And those deer were up on that hillside, and you heard, it was like I was like, that's a different deer, Alex. And he's like, you think? I was like, that is a different deer. That was not the snort wheezes we've been hearing.
That's the snort wizard.
Yeah. And then, he was like a big, I mean, that deep. I was like, God, that deer's up on that hillside. I said, I hope it comes down. Then all of a sudden, there's another pawpaw tree behind us and some autumn olives at the bottom of it. Like maybe 15 yards. And this doe just beelines off the hill. And you can tell deer's behind her. But she beelines and comes down to us and then shoots in that autumn olive. I'm like, she's in there trembling. Like she's been run ragged. Scared to death. First timer, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that buck comes off the hill. I said, I'm looking, and, it's getting gray. And I'm looking, and I'm like, dude, I think that's him. Yeah, he's a shooter. And he comes down, he's looking all around for her. And if he would have smelled her, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm sure he could have just followed her scent right there. But those 2 deer that had come out on the mine bench, like those deer were not in heat, weren't coming in heat, didn't want to get messed with. So they kind of just stayed right there at that soft edge, just kind of watching everything. And that buck had come off, and I couldn't shoot where he'd come off. This deer would never move. These deer moved, and that buck was looking around, and he saw them and turned and was going down to check them.
Because basically he got confused not knowing who he's even looking at
That's
anymore.
right.
Yeah.
I swear that, I mean, you can see it in the video. And not that I don't know if he just couldn't smell this one, but he saw those and was like, hey, let me go down there and check these.
It's like he just chose not to even just track the doe that he
Right.
apparently was on, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because he came, in front of me 20 yards. Of course, he got thumped. And, I get kind of
Fired up a little.
tore up. I'm
Little.
cool, man, until the shot.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's meltdown time.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, that doe stayed there. And then we were, like, fist bumping and shaking, and the tree started, like, creaking, and we stopped, like, 15 seconds later, and that doe finally
It's like, ooh,
was like,
something's wrong.
yeah, something's up there.
Yeah.
And she finally walked out and went through that low gap we were in. It's like she was
That's
scared.
not a pawpaw.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we heard him crash, but wasn't real sure because all those other deer were running around.
I remember that part. Like,
And-
being like, yeah, how the hell did you ever know that deer went down?
Yeah, like Alex was like, he's down. I'm like, are you sure? I think so.
Yeah.
I said, well, let's call Zach. We'll meet up with him. And what was crazy is, like, the activity in that low gap and off that edge. When we went back up there, and I had an idea where I thought he might have crashed, but I couldn't hear.
Mm-hmm.
But I just went ahead and blood trailed anyway.
Yep.
Like, we're blood trailing, and there's deer running all around us.
Just still rutting up there.
Yeah. Like, nuts.
What was the date on that one?
November 9th.
Okay.
No, November 6th.
Okay.
Yeah, November 6th. And, we're taking our pictures, and I start cleaning the deer. They're just still running. It's meaning wild. And by the time we get off the hill, phone service, across the river, there's 2 other bucks on the
that
scrape.
camera.
Jeez.
I mean, it tells you that there was multiple bucks using it. It was hot. It was that great corridor of.
And that's where they were that day, too, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, who knows if that buck would have been there? He could have took that doe he was chasing.
And they could have got in a crazy chase and just kept the whole thing rolling for a mile, 2
That's
miles.
Right. And then she comes into heat. He breeds her, tends with her, sticks around, makes her feel good about herself before he leaves. He could have been gone for 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
Now, he would have probably made his way back there.
Mm-hmm.
But I probably would have missed him because I'm probably not going to sit in the same spot and just
For 7
just hunt.
days, yeah. Well, and it's also one of those things in those situations. I always feel like if he does leave, or let's put it this way, he may have been somewhere completely different a week prior.
That's right.
He could have been holed up alone, and all of a sudden he's with all those deer because there's a doe or 2, maybe, or maybe more than that are close. There's other bucks coming in. He also is just likely the dominant one, right? Like, or one of the dominant bucks in that area, and it just kind of creates this madhouse.
And I hadn't seen him for 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he could have been up there before I put a camera up,
Mm-hmm.
but I hadn't got a picture.
How far was that from?
From where the mineral site was?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 300 400 yards.
Can you show me the two spots on there?
Yeah. I like that hybrid.
Yeah, the hybrids. Yeah, hybrids. Slick.
I love it.
Now you can do 3D on there. Just 2 fingers. You can just roll that puppy and see everything. I bet that's insane for here. Well, I was looking at it earlier, and it's insane. When you got that 3D and you can see it, and do you ever mess with the exaggeration on there?
Oh, yeah.
That really helps see things, too.
That's that little place I cut. You can see, like this, so it's about 50 yards.
Yeah.
And I was in one of these pawpaw trees right here.
Can I see this?
Yeah. So after I killed that buck, and Zach had a couple encounters, he had a real close encounter on a mega, and he didn't, grunt, snort wheezing. He was in an area that was hot looking. We had talked about it during turkey season last year because we were in there turkey hunting, and he rattled in this area, put his horns up. It was a miserable day, cold, windy, rain. He grunted, snort wheezed, and was just kind of sitting there because he had heard something behind him in the thicket, and he was trying to get it to pull out. So he's looking like this because he's thinking he heard something over here, and he turns back, and this mega is walking right at him, just like. And like Alex is sitting there filming him, and I mean he's a mega to us, typical 10 monster, and he's coming around this thicket, and the wind's blowing this way, and he's coming around, and he wasn't ready for the deer. Of course, he was thinking the deer was behind him. He wasn't even. And this out front is like open. Like he don't even know where the deer came from, whether he was bedded in some dip and he couldn't see. He said, but like all of a sudden, he said, Josh, he said, I'm telling you, if he came up from all the way across, there's no way I missed him. So he must have been somewhere right there. And as soon as he hit their wind, that son of a gun stopped, thought about it for a nanosecond, and pinwheeled. Well, then up there, where I was showing you, another hot scrape, he was out on the far end and saw some sign, and we were talking on the phone. He said, it looks good up here. He said, there's some sign. And he said, damn, he said, there he is. And he looked over on the berm, and there was a good buck. Well, this will tell you how hot it was up there. He's in a side-by-side because he's just looking. That deer bumps off, goes back in the timber where he was from. Mm-hmm. Zach goes out 300 or 400 yards, parks, and says, Alex, get her stuff, get your saddle on. We're going back here and hunting. And Alex's like, dude, we bumped that deer we were in side-by-side. He's like, there's too much going on out there. And they go back in 2 hours later. He's got a 40-yard encounter with this buck and couldn't get a shot. Hogs messed him up. That deer's like trailing. A doe had already come through, and he was like, something's on her. And that buck's coming, and then he hears something coming up from the timber, and it was a sow on her shoulds. And that buck is not coming that direction. Yeah. They're going. But it was like he saw the sign, saw the buck, bumped him. But that buck wanted up there in that area so bad that 2 hours later he got an encounter with him.
Yeah.
And a lot of people wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Are there times where, like, let's say you're finding one here.
Yep.
Are there times when all of a sudden, the next time you find him, he's like...
across.
Yeah, way down across.
Yes.
Yeah. How far away do you park the vehicle? Like, are you conscious of where you park the vehicle?
Yeah. I'm all the way out here at this opening.
Okay.
I don't want to give any sort of distraction to change that because they're always crossing from that knob across from me. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not very far as a crow flies.
Yeah,
even if they do go down and up.
The reason you probably do it too is there's just enough terrain between you and them that they don't pick you off from that far. They're not bothered by you guys getting in and out of the vehicle.
Right.
Yeah.
And
is that something you pay attention to a lot around here?
And then, if that scent and thermals is right, I mean, and that hot dose, it's not like crazy to me to think that scent's all the way over there.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
those bucks are pulling off the hill and going, hey, I'm getting in on it too.
Yeah. How far do they say sharks can smell blood in the water? It's like you'd think a white-tailed deer could probably smell that switch.
Yeah.
Pretty well.
Yeah, guaranteed.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that's pretty interesting. I want to ask here. You want to
But now sometimes you might be driving and glassing, and they see you, you see them. Hey, I'm still going to try to get you.
Yeah.
And you leave the vehicle right there, and they've seen it. They're on alert. But let's play cat and mouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially if they like dip out a little bit and go out of sight. It's just like, well, no point in worrying about it now. Might as well get out.
Yeah.
Cut down to where you last saw them and get close.
That's right.
Yeah. So the one that I want to ask about before we wrap this one up, because we're getting late into the night, but I do love the conversation.
Oh, I do too. I love bullshit.
That buck that is on your screensaver. You said, I'm pretty sure that's what you're talking about, is the one that taught you more about thermals than any deer ever, or like, you learned more about hunting that deer. Is that correct?
No, that's the Kentucky buck.
I thought that's the one you were talking about.
No.
That was the one.
The brow time.
Ah, okay. That was
that I didn't kill.
Oh, okay. I didn't miss that part.
The real big mega.
Well, tell me about that. Like what, I guess I do want to know as much as you're willing to share about what you learned from that deer specifically and how.
By spending countless days with no encounters of him other than on cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And
going back and like looking at the wind directions and stuff.
Yeah, and then once he got killed, then everybody, like I thought that there was only a few people hunting that deer, but then they were getting pictures of that deer off the property we were hunting. I mean, way off. It's like,
pull that up. Show me where you were. Seeing him.
Let me show him get a picture first.
Yeah, get me all fired up. You've seen that one, right? You've seen those pictures. Yeah, that thing's a freaky thing.
That's him.
Yeah, dude, that thing is that's not even normal. Look how big is I always think this is crazy too. No, you're not, I'm going to really throw you off. Look how wide that is.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not normal. Think of the damn track that thing's laying down. Just that alone.
Yeah.
And then, whoops. Decent little one. Look at the head on that thing.
Brow tines sticking up above its G2s.
It's freaky.
But once he got killed, like, people were posting pictures about him, and you start looking at like timestamps, and like the whole time that I'm thinking that I'm in his wheelhouse, the days I really thought I had a chance, like, he wasn't even in my vicinity.
Can you show me a couple examples of that? Because, I feel like that's so interesting, because when you hear somebody say that, and, once you get an idea of what that scale really does look like, that really does help a lot. It's like, that's the, obviously the disadvantage of not having trail cameras, and that's why everybody has them.
So that's it. That's this middle point.
That was the middle point, yeah.
Yeah, this right here.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was spread all through here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had 6, 7 cameras and was getting him on 4 to 5 cameras in
I'll pass that on.
in a 24-hour
This
period.
area.
Okay.
So say that last part again with the cameras. Sorry.
So I'd get him on 3, 4, 5 cameras a day.
Okay.
In a 24-hour. I mean, some of them be all-night pictures.
Mm-hmm. But he, at this point, it's like he's on that ridge system a lot.
No, he's there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm finding his rubs, not any other rubs.
That's what,
Like,
what I was asking earlier. What is it? What do they look like?
Dude, like, when you go to an autumn olive bush, and a grown-up one, and all the limbs are coming out, and they're 3-4 inches, and it's a heavy autumn olive. But everything on these limbs is broke off, and every 3 to 4 inch limb is shredded, and there's just like shreds hanging off. Well, that's not Mr. 4-point. That's Big Daddy.
Yeah. That's Mr. Browtine.
And when you go and you're seeing trees that are 1.5 inches and they're completely twisted, that's not a normal deer. That's a big buck that's twisting those off. When you see those aggressive rubs, so I know I was there. I mean, I know I was because I hunted him a few days, and I'd get him on a camera 80 yards away. Days that I was hunting here, that deer. Now this is a big holler.
Oh yeah.
They'd get pictures of that deer over here on this point, on a totally different property.
Yeah, just measure distance from that top that you were hunting to that top there. It's 1.1 mile, but it's over.
That's as a crow
down
flies.
And back over. Yeah, a gigantic mountain as big as the one that he's living on.
Yeah, and it was just, and then you'd get him. Some other boys would get him downstream of the river instead of upstream, and it was just like, man.
He's just all over the place back in there, kind of. But at the same time, he's got those places he really likes.
Right.
Yeah.
And
he must have just been real slick at just like figuring the hunters out. Obviously, like that had to have been his strong point because it wasn't like other people weren't in his area.
Oh no, I mean he was
well known.
There was a few guys that had known him for a couple of years, just like me.
Yeah.
And they're good hunters and relying on him. I think that the Public Land Challenge that year was the first week of November. And I knew I'd have a chance because I'd hunted him on the ground a couple times on rainy days.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm going to kill that deer in the rut this year. I'm just going to hunt on the ground every day just to keep covering ground, and I'll find him. Mm-hmm. He will pop up. And then, obviously he got killed the day I left Indiana coming back home, but, it is what it is. I was kind of glad.
Yeah, because then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
You have that, man, damn, I wish if I wouldn't have been out here, I would have killed him. Well, nah, you probably would have killed a bunch of time again.
Yeah.
But.
So do you feel like, what are the biggest takeaways as far as like what you would do differently and what you really learned from him and just some of the things that you learned even after the fact?
Before, like, Untamed and listening to podcasts and, watching you all, listening to, Bo and his knowledge with the mountains, like, I think my biggest takeaway is, I knew what the windward and leeward side was, but I didn't know the terminology, windward, leeward. Mm-hmm. I hunt tops and points for reasons. That's
consistent winds.
Yes. Or more consistent. Mm-hmm. And if it is blowing, it's going to blow out in the atmosphere. It's not,
it's not slamming into the ground and swirling again once it does it.
And you can watch the grass and it's sitting there and it just, so it's more consistent for me. But I think that I have since then hunted like that, the
mid-slope,
the top third
of
like a hillside. And I think that I would have if I would have done that with no like prominent terrain features, without, because there was no skid roads or anything between that top and the road.
Mm-hmm.
It was just slope. But if I would have hunted some of that, I think that I would have seen that deer.
Just because you think that he was working that in his
I do.
advantage. Like he's
Yeah.
in the
Like
evenings,
he's-
for
like-
example.
Like he's just not going to walk the top. Not that there's anything bothering him up there.
Except for he's like probably 6 years old plus.
Probably 7, something like that.
Just older
And
than
he's just,
shit.
you know, highly knowledgeable. And
Yeah.
Like, I've seen my buddies get smoked up on
Yeah.
places like that. I'm not going up there.
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know. But I've seen more. I've talked, you know, listened to you all talk about hunting that mid slope,
Mhm.
that top third of a hill, and I think that if I'd have done that early season and then into the end of October, I would have. Because I had too many pictures of him, and if I would have just got off the top some and tried to get in his. I felt like I was in his house, and I honestly thought at the time I was in his bedroom. I was just like in his yard.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, I should have been in his bedroom, but
You should have
And
been
I-
down like
yes.
on that, like on this weird little point where there's a flat right here or
Yes.
something. Like, because
Yes.
that's probably where
Right.
now where you think he was bedded
Yes.
or here or something.
yes, yes,
Even though the sign's all up here, it's like, yeah, now that you have hindsight, it's like there. But it's like, but it is interesting too, because that transition line,
Yeah.
if that's thick and it's open below him, even if it's barely thick behind him and he can look down there towards that road, I'm sure that makes him feel real safe. And then like
Oh,
what we were
yeah.
talking about earlier, what else is a great thing to be able to do from right there? Skyline, anything coming off the top, and especially right there. It's interesting to me, that one is almost as interesting, if not more, because he's got a better ability to skyline.
yep, yeah. That deer drove me crazy, but you know,
I mean, you got a lot out of it, though. That's what's
Oh,
really
no.
cool about it.
I mean, it's a grind. I mean, that was the first deer I said I'm like going to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to pass. You know, deer that come in that ain't him,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to hunt him. And the guys that do that, hey man, mad respect for them.
Yeah.
But it ain't me.
Yeah, I got mad respect for it because it ain't me either.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do it. I can't have
Yeah, I
the
mean-
patience for it.
Nah, I mean it drove me crazy, my family crazy. You know, I just became obsessed with that deer, and like, it's cool. One time, I didn't like it. It wasn't fun to me.
Yeah.
Like if I'd have
You
killed
start
it,
pulling, it's like you're pulling your hair out or banging your head against the wall, however you want, whatever
I
your
mean,
terminology for it. It's like it ends
every
up
night,
being that.
you know, you go out there, and like I said, we hunted 9 days and saw 3 deer. I mean, anybody that is seeing those numbers like I was saying should probably change locations.
Yeah.
I don't care where you're at. So I guess I would have said it was fun if I'd have killed that deer,
Yeah.
but it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
And I won't participate again. It's that simple.